Hey there, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. As I mentioned a few times, I want to take the weekend off. It was my son graduated from college, so I didn't want to be sitting there on Friday at 4 in the morning recording a bunch of episodes before I headed out. Rolling Stone caught up with John Mulaney. This is lengthy here. Apparently, Mulaney first broke down the Rock Hall of Fame inductees and snubs with Rolling Stone in 2018. The plan was for it to be an annual tradition. Mulaney said COVID and some personal problems got in the way, but he's ready to recommit and says, I'll make this an annual thing now. Mulaney started off with some advice. When you're in your 20s, take as many photos of yourself as possible. You're so good looking. The topic of Chubby Checker. Rolling Stone asked Mulaney, does he have any experience with the twist or Let's Twist Again? Mulaney said, well, I really appreciate Let's Twist Again like we did last summer. It's a very funny lyric for a reboot. I really like the bald-facedness of Let's Twist Again like we did last summer, saying, remember we did the song The Twist last year? We're doing it again. And also, I think Let's Twist Again is a better song than The Twist. I don't think I'm alone in that. Sorry, I didn't mean to make it sound like such a novel idea. Is Chubby Checker still with us? Rolling Stone asked John, is there a group that you don't care about that you want to see in the Hall of Fame? He said, okay, I mean, a lot are in already. Help me think a little. Butthole Surfers? Flaming Lips? They're not in, right? Stone? No, they're not. Mulaney talked about Fish. This was hugely important music to us. It really kept bands alive. The idea of a band in 1999 playing guitars, piano, and drums was not easy to find. Funny exchange here. John, I have no opinion on the Black Crowes. Are you being diplomatic? No, I genuinely have no opinion. If that's the pull quote, we've got a viral story. In 2018, John said that the Hall had an anti-Chicago bias. Mulaney said, a lot of things I said in 2018 could be buffeted with, but in reality, John's a little off. I like that they don't say, well, John's just misguided and might be on speed. They're like, is there some truth? We won't say no. All right, moving on. Tonight is the 12th annual Patrice O'Neill Comedy Benefit Concert. Rosebud Baker, Greer Barnes, D.C. Benny, Bill Burr, Tim Dillon, Nimesh Patel, Sean Patton, and Rich Voss. Pretty good lineup. That's at New York City Center at 7:30. I've told the story in the past. I'm not going to be shy. Never, ever once enjoyed an encounter with Patrice O'Neill. He just had this thing of, like, he would just come at you for no reason just to see how you would react. And, like, dude, this is a professional workspace. We're at a comedy festival. You know we're trying to do interviews. Don't do your stupid thing. Go away. So, personally, Patrice O'Neill's comedy, funny. Patrice O'Neill, the dude. I know the comedians revere him, love him. Never enjoyed my time with him. That said, let's raise some money tonight with a good lineup. Dylan from the Facebook group, which is Daily Comedy News Podcast Group, shared this one with me from Cracked. Nora Dunn. Remember when Nora Dunn was on SNL? Well, back on May 12th, 1990, Andrew Dice Clay hosted SNL. He was quite controversial back in that time. Nora Dunn refused to participate in the show that week. SNL doubled down. They kept Dice and made repeated jokes about Nora Dunn. Cracked asked, you'd been on the show for 5 years at that point. Did you plan on coming back the next year? Nora said, I actually wasn't coming back after my 5 years, but the reason was only because I didn't want to do any more sketches. I didn't have any more sketches. I was really anxious to move on. A lot of what I call kids were coming in. I thought, boy, this humor's now bending towards 12-year-old boys. She's referencing Adam Sandler there. Nora Dunn and I could be friends. She says of Sandler, great guy, but I have to tell you, when I saw him on the show playing that thing, I was like, time to leave. Anyway, so Dice is going to host the show. Nora tells Al Franken, I ain't doing the show. I'm not coming in. I called several other cast members and said, do you know that Andrew Dice Clay's doing the show? And they were like, no. Some were saying, well, I'm not going to perform with him, and I won't write for him. And I said, well, I'm not going to work with him. That's how the word got out to NBC. It must have been Monday morning. I got a call from the AP. He told me SNL was posting a piece on me that said my contract wasn't going to be renewed. Cracked. Who did you voice your objections to that you weren't going to do the show? Just Al Franken? Nora, yeah, just Al Franken. I called Lorne on Monday morning, too, but I believe he was at a funeral. He didn't return my call. Franken wasn't surprised. He actually asked Lorne that week not to have him on the show. He said it's a mistake, he's divisive, and people are going to turn against us if you have him on the show. But Lorne said he was an interesting phenomenon worth examining. Nora said, well, so was Hitler. I've been examining him for years. That doesn't mean I accept him. I know he says he was doing a parody, but the laughs are coming because they love the character and they agree with that character. He was Andrew Dice Clay. He was billed as him. He came out as him. Cracked. Why do you think Lorne went forward with him as the host? Nora, I don't know. I think he didn't want to admit he was wrong. I think he was very, very upset the way I did it, which he calls bad form. But I did call him, and he did know, and I didn't think that anyone would notice. Crack said, how come you never objected to someone like Sam Kinison? Nora, I love Sam. He was a smart comic. I got along with him very well. I had seen him in clubs, and he wasn't hateful. Most of his jokes turned on himself. Dice was so hateful. He was whipping people up by saying things even Johnny Mac doesn't want to repeat 30 years later. I'll paraphrase, jokes about AIDS. I'll leave it there. People would pound their tables. One of the good pieces I read on Dice was saying, if you listen to a show, people aren't laughing. They're pounding on the tables. They're expressing anger. That's what they're angry about. Interesting change here. Have you spoken to Lorne about any of this? No, he never spoke to me again. He did hire me to do some things. He was the producer on a Seth Rogen movie, and I got word that Lorne wants you to do it, but he only wants to pay you $2,500. And for the size of the role, it should have been like $25,000. I did it, but it was one of those things that his little message, you're going to come and work for me for scale. I also noticed in the credits that I was put last after every character that could have been a walk-on, and I had a pretty long scene too. That's the kind of thing I suspect Lorne of. Wow. I was seated at the 50th anniversary in the last row of the studio. I wasn't asked to be in anything, and in the montage of the year that I was on, I wasn't in it at all. And I shouldn't be saying this. I went on the floor afterwards. I ended up standing next to Marty Short watching Paul McCartney sing, and when we finished, we looked at each other and we had tears in our eyes. Then I turned, and there's Lorne standing there. I hadn't talked to him in years. I went up and I said, Lorne Michaels, and hugged him. 50 years, good work. He just said, yeah, and walked away. And I went, now that's a petty man. Wow. The LA Times caught up with Iliza Shlesinger. They were curious how she reaches different age audiences. Iliza said, I'm always developing jokes for me, and I'm mindful of who might be in the audience, but I'm very lucky that I don't have a homogenous audience. I think with some comics, you know exactly the archetype of their fans, and because I'm fortunate enough to be able to play audiences across the country, you don't really know who you're going to get. You can kind of guess, but we have everyone from conservative veterans to a super queer contingent to people who just look like your parents to Gen Z. So it's always about the truth, and it's always about saying something honest. Because comedy comes from vulnerability and from honesty. I don't hate Gen Z or baby boomers. My comedy comes from a place of very much wanting to be seen and explain myself. I don't ever write anything to hurt anyone deliberately, and so all my comedy comes from this unending need to understand what the bleep is going on. I think we make the mistake of thinking that if it's pro-female, it has to be anti-male, and both things can be true, that you're critiquing something without aiming to harm and also wanting women to feel a little bit better. One of the comments that I sadly still get is women will come up to me and they'll say, that was my first stand-up show. And I'll be like, yep, that's right, because your boyfriend probably only showed you his favorite male comics, so you thought comedy wasn't for you. I'm not the only woman who does stand-up. Thankfully, there's so many more now that even when I started, so everybody can find something for them. But I think there's a way to bring men in. I call it digestible feminism. Bring men in a way so you just present the facts and you make everyone laugh. But you're saying something that women in the audience can vibrate with, and men, if you don't hate women, will be like, hey, that's a good thought. Nobody buys a ticket to a comedy show to hear why their politics are wrong, why their gender is wrong, why their color is wrong. And so I try to keep it all social and light and just hit you with scathing hot facts that are irrefutable, wrapped in comedy, so you can digest it and talk about it on your drive home to La Crescenta later. And that is your comedy news for today. If you enjoy the program, tell a friend about it too. If you've discovered this thing on YouTube, hey, I'm an old guy in a basement doing a mostly audio podcast, so hook me up. Ring the bell and like and follow and whatever you're supposed to do on YouTube. Just do that. Hook the old guy up, okay? See you guys tomorrow.